Hey, good morning and welcome to the Policy Committee meeting on October 24th. I call the meeting to order. All members are here. I need an approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next up is the approval of the open session minutes from September 19th.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
4-0, thank you again. Next up is policies for second review. Morris?
Good morning, everyone. Just as a reminder, all of these policies, the proposed revisions and the newly drafted policies were based on the recommendations of the North Carolina School Boards Association and Campbell Shatley. And these policies were also reviewed by staff and our Title IX coordinator, and they're related to the Parents' Bill of Rights. The first one is policy 3-01, staff responsibilities. That policy came before you in September and the board in total in October. There's been no stakeholder feedback since that time, and staff would request that this go for approval at the November meeting.
Motion to approve, recommend approval to the full board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, thank you. Next up is policy 4-415, sorry.
Yeah, surveys of students. This one also came before you in September and the full board in October for first review. There's been no stakeholder input, and staff will request that this go for approval at the November meeting as well.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Policy 5-01, selection of instructional materials. This policy came before you for review in September and for the board in October. There's been no stakeholder feedback since that time, and staff requests that this policy go for approval at the November meeting as well.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, thank you. Next up.
Health education program, policy 5-07. This policy was reviewed in September by the committee and October by the board, and there's been no stakeholder input since that time. So staff would request that this policy go for approval in November.
Motion to submit for approval, full board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Hey, the proposed new policy, parent involvement. This policy was reviewed by the committee in September and the board in October. As you know, there was a survey sent to the community, including all parents, all employees, administrators, community partners, for feedback on the proposed policy. I have read every one of the 448 comments that we received in response to the survey. And those comments, the survey results are included in the materials for this meeting. Majority of the comments were related to the bill, the law itself, and not actually the policy. There was a lot of, it's a good bill, it's a bad bill. There were comments that the policy read like a software licensing agreement. And then there were some that were specific to the policy that I thought were necessary or appropriate for adoption. If you look at the blue font on this policy, so you've got red and blue, paragraph C, or part C, paragraph 3Y, I revised the language that had been proposed by the School Boards Association and took the language from your policy 1-18 statement of non-discrimination and placed that language right into the policy and replaced that, because there were some comments about that not being as expansive as what we had in other places. And then policy, or paragraph E3, there were some comments about the fact that we didn't address the exceptions for when parents should be contacted, and the language in the proposed policy does say subject to legal exceptions, and I added those statutory citations so people knew what the exceptions were. So staff would request that this policy as revised go to the board in November for approval.
Michelle, I have a
Yep.
question or
Sure.
request more like on the parents' comments feedback.
Yep.
Starting on page 21, there are some boxes at the top of the page, and it appears, I don't know what happened, but it looks like all the comments thereafter are cut off.
It's probably the way it prints. I can attach the Excel spreadsheet to the meeting materials that might be easier to read.
Okay.
Let me pull it. I will do that right this second.
Or what?
So if you want to look at it while we're,
Yeah, it's just kind of hard to.
yeah, when you turn in it, Board Docs likes everything in PDF. And so when you put in Excel spreadsheets, sometimes it doesn't attach them. So let me see if I can do that for y'all right now.
Okay, any other questions? I need a motion to send this to the full board.
Request for approval by full board.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Rowe, thank you. Next up is proposed new policy, student health services.
Yes, this policy was reviewed in September by the committee and then by the board in October. And then there's been no stakeholder feedback since that time. So we would ask that that go to the board for approval in November.
So move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, thank you. Last one.
And the last of the policies for second review is proposed new policy, criminal behavior. This policy was also reviewed by the committee in September and the board in October. There's been no stakeholder input since that time, and staff would request that this policy go for approval in November.
Motion to recommend approval by the full board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. So all the policies for second review are going to the full board on November 8th.
And when I upload this into Board Docs for the full board meeting, I will leave that Excel spreadsheet as well. Hopefully it'll transfer in Board Docs and it'll be easier to read for the full board.
Okay. Okay. Next up is policies for first review.
Okay, the first three policies and administrative guidelines, A, B, and C, are all related to the same issue, so I'll address them together. Each allowed for the showing of rated R movies at school. In fact, one of them had referenced a list of approved rated R movies. And I think the list that we used to have was back from when I first came to the district back in 2008, I think. And we've not updated the list. And I think Dr. Breedlove's response when people would ask for the list is that it is a list with no movies on it, because he was not necessarily in favor of that. So, and Dr. Rogers has the same kind of position on it. So what we have done is remove that language and said that any showing of a rated R movie would have to be approved by the principal and then the superintendent or his designee. And so that is 5-01, the administrative guidelines for selection of instructional materials. Policy 5-02, which is the copyright policy, and then the administrative guidelines that go with that copyright policy. And we can go through each of them individually or however you'd like to proceed. The 5-01, those administrative guidelines. As you can see, the red is what's being removed, and the green is what's been added. So it removes that list of rated R movies and has it go through the superintendent and designate and the principal.
Any questions?
I'm
sorry.
happy to take this as a package.
Okay.
Okay.
5-02 is the same way. And all of these have been revised. Some of them said parental permission slips were recommended. Some said required. We made it required on all of them
Thank you.
for consistency. And so that's all 3 of them.
Okay.
Make a motion to recommend all to the full board for consideration.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, thank you. Last is policy 6-02, parent.
Yeah, parent organizations. The way this policy previously read is that the principal would have to approve all fundraisers, not just the money and how it would be received. Like there was a fundraiser, but actually the particular fundraiser that the booster club or parent organization would have. This revision is to continue that the principal would have to approve that there be a fundraiser and the use of the monies, but would allow the PTO or booster club to select whatever type of fundraiser they wanted to run. So it gives a little more independence back to the parent organization, but still requires that the board approve the donation, select how the donation will be used, and, approve that there actually be a fundraiser. So they're not fundraising arbitrarily without the involvement
Can
of the
we
school and the
fast track this because we want to be in compliance?
Yes, we could fast track this at the November meeting.
All right.
So
With that said, Madam Chair, as a former PTSO president, I motion that we fast track this at the next board meeting for approval.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
So that means we're gonna jump ahead and at the November meeting would be the final approval of that.
Yes,
All right.
okay. So our next meeting is November 21st at 8 a.m. on Zoom. I need a motion to adjourn.
So
So-
moved.
Well, before
All in
we.
favor?
Whoa.
Aye.
Gary had something, Madam Chair.
Oh, Gary has something? I'm sorry, Gary.
I just had a quick question for Michelle. We had talked a while back about reviewing, and I can't remember what the collection of videos are called, but they're required training and safety videos that staff is required to complete within a certain number of days after the beginning of school. And you had mentioned you were going to, it'd been a good while, if ever, that they'd been reviewed for perhaps instead of every year, it could be every 3 years or what have you. Have you had a chance to set a timeline when you might be able to take a look at some of those?
yeah, I have reviewed the ones that are on the list to be reviewed by staff within the first 30 days.
Mhm.
And all of them are identified either by policy or law that they be reviewed. And most of them are things that we would expect, things like child abuse and neglect, recognizing we have the safe shooter video. I mean, they're all of significance. Now, we can continue to review them and I can bring that list to the policy committee if that.
Yes.
Okay.
Because it's not on the agenda right now, so.
Yeah. If you could bring it back next meeting, listing the ones, separately that are required by law that we don't have any flexibility on.
Okay,
And then if you have a
This
chance,
off.
any where we can consider flexibility.
we need to take this off. the
Yeah,
meeting,
some of
since it's
them,
not
yeah,
On the
and-
agenda, so,
That's all I wanted, just a question.
okay. So we have a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Have a good one. Yep.